and you've already been forewarned. Business. Stephen is with us here on set. Stephen's been looking at the economic consequences of those agreements between Israel, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, Stephen.
Yeah, that's right. Now, from an economic point of view, the deal with the UAE is much bigger and much more important than what it is with Bahrain. There isn't a precise estimate of exactly what that deal would mean to those economies. Israeli ministers have talked about it being worth billions of dollars in trade. Israel's intelligence minister saying earlier this month that within 3 to 5 years there could be $4 billion worth of trade between Israel and the United Arab Emirates as a result of this deal. Now, there has been some trade between the countries up until now, but it's been done in secret through intermediaries and other fashions, and that will now be able to develop in the open and develop at a much greater pace. There are a number of key sectors which will see this development of relations between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. Oil, obviously, Israel tends to get its oil supplies at the moment from Iraqi Kurdistan, so that could see an opening there for the UAE to sell them more. Travel and tourism is going to be a huge one. The UAE could be a massive market for people travelling from Israel, but also connectivity to Dubai's airport is going to be a really major boost for travel. We've already seen the first direct flights begin there. Israel has technological expertise on things like desalination and agriculture, which could be of really important interest to countries that have food insecurity problems like those in the Gulf. Higher education bodies from both countries have already begun discussions on things like research cooperation on issues like artificial intelligence, again leaning on that technological expertise that exists in Israel. Israel's Minister for Regional Cooperation saying that if relations normalise with Saudi Arabia in the future, which is one of the hoped consequences of this deal, that there could even be a rail link built across the region to connect these countries.
Big changes then. Sounds like pretty high hopes from what you're saying. I mean, how would those trade links compare to Israel's relationships with its other neighbours, though?
Now, normalisation of relations with other countries hasn't led to the same level of economic ties. Trade with Egypt and Jordan, for example, in 2018 was only in the hundreds of millions of dollars. That's despite peace deals being in place for decades with those countries. Trade with Turkey is significantly larger, but that's mostly down to oil, as I was saying just a moment ago. That doesn't mean the UAE deal couldn't produce much bigger results. The history between those countries is very different, as it is with some of those neighbours, and the fact that there was some trade happening even before this agreement suggests that there's great potential for more to come from this as well.
We shall see. Next, on to the latest of TikTok's troubles in the US.
That's right, US officials are to examine a bid from tech giant Oracle to partner with the Chinese-owned video app. It's not an outright sale. Instead, Oracle would become what's known as a trusted technology provider for TikTok. But that deal might not calm regulators' fears over national security, as Luke Shrego now reports.
Could Oracle be the firm to help salvage TikTok's US operations? After beating out a bid from Microsoft, the Californian business software company might be able to partner with TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance and prevent a looming shutdown of the video sharing app in the USA set for next weekend. The US administration's taken an increasingly dim view of Chinese-owned companies' penetration into its territory, fearing Beijing could force them to share US user data with it and spy on US citizens.
Seeing a Chinese company get this popular, this fast, really underscores how the dynamics of the internet are changing. What does that mean when one of their companies becomes a huge success here? This is not going to be the last time this happens.
TikTok's always denied it would share data with Beijing and says it doesn't store data from its 100 million US users in China. However, Chinese law may not give it much choice if ever ordered to do so. Ensuring TikTok is US owned and run would, for the White House, allay security concerns, even as Beijing accuses Washington of strong-arming its competition.
Without any evidence at all, they generalize the concept of national security and abuse state power to purposely coerce and unjustifiably crack down on non-American enterprises that have taken the lead in particular fields.
China altered regulations over tech exports late last month, likely ensnaring the artificial intelligence algorithm at the heart of the TikTok app. That would prevent ByteDance from selling it off outright, leaving Oracle in position to manage US data in partnership with the Chinese company. Either way, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States will still have to review the Oracle deal for any other potential national security risks.
China's economy is showing new signs of growth. Retail sales rose in August, the first time we've seen that happen since the pandemic struck. until now, spending had remained sluggish. Despite the virus being largely under control in China, factory output rising in the country as well last month. Oxford Economics saying the recovery in China is on a reasonably firm footing now.
How's that going down on the markets then, Stephen?
It's helped to boost shares in Hong Kong in trading. We had seen some gains in Shanghai earlier as well. Falls, though, on the Nikkei in Tokyo and on the Kospi in Seoul too. That's the picture you can see on the Asian markets there. So gains in Shanghai and Hong Kong, and the Kospi in Seoul has, despite what I just said, just turned into positive territory. So there you are, the latest figures on the stock markets. Investors will be watching closely. Central banks, particularly the US Federal Reserve, which begins its two-day meeting later, on the currency markets. Keeping an eye on the pound sterling with everything that's happening with Brexit. Lawmakers in the UK voting for that internal market bill, which is, of course, causing massive tension in trade talks with the European Union. Sterling is down against the euro, but up against the dollar. That's mainly down to weakness in the dollar, though, that we've seen those gains against that currency.
Stephen Carroll, contradicting himself, never. Finally from Stephen, though, a former Facebook employee has written the scale of disinformation circulating on the social network.
That's right. Sophie Zhang worked on a Facebook team which is supposed to root out so-called inauthentic activity on the platform. She wrote a 6,000-word post which was circulated internally on her last day at the company. It's also been seen by media organisations like BuzzFeed. In it, she says that she experienced multiple blatant attempts by foreign national governments to abuse the platform on what she said were vast scales. Her letter raising questions over how well Facebook can police bots or automated accounts on its platform, which is used by more than 2.7 billion people. In response to Zhang's post, Facebook says it regularly removes coordinated campaigns and has a large team working on security. But as always, in tense political times, roles of social media becomes even more important.
Exactly. Indeed. Very, very tricky. Thank you very much, Stephen. Stephen Carroll with Business on France 24. We've got all the latest news coming up for you very shortly on France 24, including Perspective as well in the next half hour. Stay with us for that.